Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 861. Yes, the Sao Paulo / Brazilian Grand Prix. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
And you know what we do on race weekends. You know this by now.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. But before doing that, I have to introduce my guests, and you know what that means, don't you?
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
Good. Big podium
Spending some
finish
time-
over in the Middle East there for the final
Yes.
Heart of Racing Aston Vantage GT, the end of an era.
GTE, the end of an era. Yeah. Finished on the
Yeah.
podium on it. That was pretty
Finished on
awesome.
the
I wasn't
podium.
there, of course.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it
was,
was good job.
Good result. So it was Ian and Roman and who?
Not Roman. No, Alex and Danny.
Oh, yeah.
Who only does the WEC stuff with them. He's a silver driver, but he's Italian, very, very Italian, in fact. But yeah,
nice.
but no, it was a great result there. The car was competitive. 2 Astons were on the podium, so so end of an era, but it's going to be exciting things to come for next year as we make our way back there. Beginning of a new era. Yeah, it's going to.
Right.
The GT stuff in WEC is going to be so much better next year. It's going to be super competitive.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Well, congratulations on that. I know I was out of town. I hodgepodge got the race and the sprint and everything won. I was on a family mission and I was out of town, but I did get everything watched and notes created for the Grand Prix, and I did see the Stormageddon on Friday and
all
and
of
that
course
good
the
stuff.
sprint, your favorite.
Yeah, I mean, edge of seat, Don't bother buying a seat. You won't need it at the
Why
sprint
even come on
race.
Sunday when you got the sprint on Saturday? That's what I want to say.
Yeah, why? What's the point? Nothing to see here, right? So I got it.
Nothing can match that excitement.
No. It's knee slapping fun. It's good fun. So let's do a little formation lap of the race to set the table here. I'm going to tell on myself, like I said, I was out of town. I got, the bulk of everything watched. And I after Friday, and I was kind of reading online and trying to follow along, and I was thinking that qualifying seemed odd, the order of qualifying on Friday, given the last 2 Grand Prix. And I thought, well, maybe it was because it was a truncating running. They only got that single shot in Q3 because of Stormageddon. Maybe that was, maybe we're a little out of place because you got 2 Astons up front. You had Lance in third. And I was thinking, wow, okay, so that had to be not representative of the reality. That was a truncated, qualifying session. Boy, was I wrong. Right? That was for real. And we'll talk about when we get to Aston Martin. Great race for both. The track has also just extended this weekend. Now it's extended its presence on the F1 calendar until 2030. So if you are a huge Interlagos fan like Paul and I are, then that's going to be awful exciting to you. And thankfully, Paul, my prayers were answered. I got to see Rubino on the grid.
Oh,
Rubens
I thought you were going to say
great.
you finally got to see Machine Gun Kelly, but yeah, Rubens was there too.
My career? I don't follow my career. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't follow my career. Let's play air guitar. Dude, just go away. Martin was like uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. We're all uncomfortable.
What?
I still don't understand why they have a guy of Brundle's stature and experience doing the color stuff on the grid. It doesn't. I mean, now it's just a thing to see how uncomfortable you can make Martin Brundle. I feel. It seems like it.
I know it's become the awkward Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And who's going to get the gold medal for the most awkward? Machine Gun Kelly so far has that. But
I have seen other people who know kind of who he is. They overplay how important Martin Brundle is. Oh my God, it's so amazing to meet you. They want to be the anti non F1 fan on the pit lane. But it's uncomfortable from beginning to end, quite honestly.
It is. It really is. They
Bring
should
back
get,
Danica. No.
They should get Will Buxton out there. Will be out there working the crowd.
Well, he does do it on the F1 TV feed.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He does.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then I guess they had Hinchcliffe in there. Him and Brundle cross paths in the middle of it.
The Hinch,
anyway,
I
sorry.
saw that. Yeah. So I got to see Rubens. He looks great. You're looking
He
great,
does,
Rubens.
yeah.
Great to see you. Love some Who doesn't like Rubens Barrichello? That was great. But I gotta be
Right.
honest with you, I don't know what part of the fence Felipe Massa climbed and jumped over in order to get
He
in the
was up
paddock.
against. Right.
I don't know how he got in there.
Did
The
anyone
guy's
find
still
him? So he made a beeline for the exit? I don't know. Bernie may have
He
tipped him
got
off.
in there. Yeah, and Bernie was there, right? And so
Yeah.
Felipe Massa got there. Who sponsored him to give him a hard card to get in? I don't know, maybe Ferrari. And then Bernie was there, and I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you caught. Seemed like there was this awkward sort of moment right there with Martin and Bernie. I think Bernie got a little emotional, and threw Martin off a little bit. Yeah.
He was
I thought
happy to
that
be
was
there because he
interesting.
thought he would be in jail. Yeah.
Yeah. Not something you would typically see from Bernie, but he's
No,
in his
Bernie's
90s,
usually
so.
on it, it's like.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him in a while, and he's been through a lot
Yeah.
recently, so maybe so.
Yeah, it could be. So, strange weekend with me, though, has to be that the fact that the race only had one tire, the soft.
Mhm.
The soft compound was the choice. The medium had no pace advantage, and the hard would
No
simply
longevity pace
overheat.
advantage,
Yeah. And the hard would just simply overheat and get too hot and no grip. And I
Those
find that
wacky
really
Pirelli
weird.
guys.
That's 2 Grand Prix now, Paul, that we've shown up to with the tire not fit for purpose. Remember Qatar, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so you have Qatar
yeah.
and Brazil now with the tires just not fit for purpose on the track. And I think it's very, very difficult. And then you compound that. And maybe this is where deference comes in from Mercedes, but you compound the fact that you've only got one tire that really is fit for purpose in Brazil. And then you compound that with it being a sprint race weekend, right?
Right.
So everybody's locked in. And it probably took them a soft or two to figure that out, and then you're out of softs. And that's brutal. I mean, it was the same for everyone, but really that was difficult. I thought that was strange.
Yeah.
And then finally, just stop the madness with the sprint. I'm glad they're going to take another look at it. And for me, I wish they'd just pass on it. But
Yeah.
for the love of all things good and wholesome, stop it. That would be good.
I mean, how many people, apart from Karun Chandhok, have you heard
Karun
saying
loves
positive
it.
things about it? Yeah.
Karun loves it. He just loves it. Karun's living his best life. He loves everything about F1, so that's good. He's kind of got the Nico Rosberg-itis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over positivity. Yes.
Yeah.
Could just back down
Tell me
just
what
a
you
little
really
bit.
think. Tell me what you really think.
This is the best amuse-bouche I've ever eaten in my life.
I was driving during the Grand Prix. Luckily, I got the ESPN radio feed, and I know Jenny Gal's one of them, and I don't know the other two. There's 2 women, Jenny and Alice, maybe, and
Nancy?
maybe, and then there's a guy, and I can't. I've never listened to that radio feed until this weekend when I was going, and but they did a good
So
job.
it's the
Yeah, they did.
ESPN radio feed. I'm not even sure I've heard that.
Yeah, it's like ESPN radio.
But it's
on
not the F1. It's not
No.
the F1 TV people. Okay. So it's not Hinch.
No,
It's a whole
no.
nother
this
group
was-
doing the
It
radio.
is.
Huh.
That's what surprised me, because you have Sky and then you have
Yeah.
F1, and it surprised me
Right.
there's a whole dedicated radio crew that's broadcast on ESPN radio, and it was Jenny and another woman, and then a guy. And I apologize, I don't remember the
It's
names.
probably
of
the
the
BBC
two,
group is what. That's what
Maybe.
it is. It's probably the
I bet-
BBC group. Yeah.
but I bet you're right.
Yeah.
I bet you're right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I listened to it, but then I did come home and watch it and got Crofty and Martin's take, and I wanted to see, all the details. So let's jump into the
Yep.
race and review it
Let's do it.
as it unfolded, shall we? How did it unfold? Yes, let's do it. Yes, here we go. It's not the Brazilian Grand Prix, Paul. It is the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. And kudos to Sao Paulo for doing a little branding there and No, let's not just call it Brazil. Rio doesn't get the benefits. It's the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, and I like that. So that's good. So you had Red Bull right up top. Sergio Perez, P4, Max Verstappen, P1, taking another victory. Max had 2 clean starts, led comfortably, although Lando gave it a go early on. But right after, I thought it was interesting, right after Lando made that lunge, was gone. He clawed 1.2 seconds or 1 second in just that sector alone using ERS, right? And just clawed it out. As soon as he took that lunge, Max like, oh, that was close. Zip, gone.
It's like those old movies where when they're doing a race and it's like, this time I'm going to go up to the high gear and I'm going to use all the gas pedal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They're doing 120 miles an hour and they keep shifting. What gear are they in? It's like, did you shift down?
Safe fuel.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, right. So anyway, so that was good. I think Max won his 17th race of the season. It breaks his own record, and had the race pretty much under control. Had the weekend really under control from that. If he he's very close to breaking Fangio's win rate of 75% in a season. So watch this space; it's getting very close. But another dominant performance. Great tire management up front. I think he managed pretty much that entire race. And you think, well, Lando had a shot at him, and then you saw him pull out a second.
Right.
And then
he didn't have 30 seconds in him, but he had a hand.
Yeah, he had pace in hand. But it was a good race from Max for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Like the execution is phenomenal. So
yeah, it is. And then we had Sergio. Sergio made up some places. He had some places to make up because of qualifying. So he made up the places. He looked like the Sergio of old, passing his way up through the field. I mean, technically, he shouldn't have to pass his way up through the field and pass that many people every race, but every race shouldn't be a recovery race for him. But barring that, it was a good recovery and a good performance of that car. And despite that, he reckons it took him too long to get by the Mercs, and that pretty much damaged his race from that point on. And he may be right there, as managing tires seemed like the main purpose of this race, ultimately. And Sergio most likely chewed up his tires a bit, trying to get around those Mercs and those attempts and get back up on the podium and then take a shot at Alonso. And when he got at Alonso, probably wasn't, rich with grip on those tires at that point.
Yeah.
But in the end, he had to manage his tires after abusing them to get around the Mercs. And then once he got there, he had to, got around. He had to be patient at that point, I think, not overuse the tires, let that Alonso battle come to him. He did. And by the time that he got to Alonso, he had some tires to go after him. And we'll talk about, I want to talk about the Alonso defense and Alonso driving when we get to Aston Martin, but, because I think there's a lot to unpack there. But from Sergio's perspective, it was a good return to form, nearly a podium. It's doing what he needs to do.
Yeah, but obviously, as you said, you can't discount that qualifying is a part of a weekend. And I still don't think that's the old Sergio, because the old Sergio wouldn't have been back there. The old Sergio wasn't making those mistakes. The old Sergio was on front 2 rows. So it's still... There's still a lack of performance there for sure. I mean, yes, it's a great comeback drive. You can't come back every week. And as these other cars catch up, the ability for him to be able to march his way through the field is limited, right? And he has to think about it. He just doesn't have that much in hand. So,
the leverage, I think you're absolutely right, because the leverage there really is that qualifying. If you can qualify second, third, fourth, that's the leverage, because when you're down in fifth, sixth, seventh, you got some pretty quick cars to try to get through. And
right. You can afford to be patient you qualify at shop, and you can afford to be patient because you're racing 1 or 2 people, and with the pace of that car, you don't even have to pass them on the track. You can pass them in strategy, pit stops, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
And he took too long to get by people. Absolutely. And the Mercedes pair were floundering, as we saw, so it should have been easier than usual, really.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. But anyway, all right, let's talk about McLaren. Lando Norris in P2, Oscar Piastri down in P14. Lando had 2 good starts as well. on the opening lap. He jumped up to second from sixth place. Great start from him. Tucked down on the inside, came up to second.
Yeah.
Drove very tight a race while he pressed Max briefly, trying to get to a little bit of competitiveness. He didn't have the pace to really challenge. I think in that final stint, Paul, I think they hung him out a little because they had time in hand. From the pit stop, and I think they wanted to try to keep him out a little bit, see if a safety car come out, something, and give him a cheap stop that he might retain the lead. But it didn't happen. They boxed him, but you can't take that away from him. I thought it was executed really well.
No, I think that's a good strategy. I mean, it was fairly obvious they were going to beat him toe to toe. So if they got that option with the yellow or something like that, and the cheap pit stop saved them 10 seconds, it was worth a go. And he closed the gap a fair bit. Because obviously with the tires as it was, so I think McLaren ran the strategy well. Lando ran a great race too.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You rust up against the Red Bull, Max Verstappen, and he had one shot at it. Mm-hmm. I think it was a outside shot, and I think Max had it covered, but. You never know. Unless you press someone, you don't know what you can make happen. That's why I always say you just stay on them, even if you think they've got the pace on you and they can do whatever. If you push them, you make things happen.
Yeah. There's something to be said about pushing, because even if you don't have the fastest car, you can win a race by pushing.
Yeah. Opportunity arises if you pressure people, even if they're not highly pressured. It does distract them, and that's what we always say with any of our drivers. You just stay on it. You never know when that opportunity arises. Maybe there's a flat tire, maybe there's an errant back marker gets in the way, but there's an opportunity, and if you're not within distance to strike, then you're not doing your job.
Yep. Oscar, unfortunately, he got hit from behind, which damaged his rear wing. And even though the red flag allowed them to repair that wing and get the car back out in the race, the damage was done. It's pretty significant. He was at the back of the grid at the restart. Unfortunately, he and Ricardo had came into the pit lane under the safety car, boxed to retire. But when the flag came out, the cars came back into pit lane and that was lap 2, and that meant that they would restart a lap down, or at least that was my understanding, Paul. But then you went on board and listened to Ricardo, and they very much were talking to Dan about a possible red flag. So for them to box the first shot through, because I thought, they boxed them both on the first pass through the pit lane, they're just going to retire the cars.
Right.
But if the team was talking red flag, then that's a bit of a bungle. They should have sent them back out for that second lap, right? Or at least that's what you call
because
it.
I mean, from my side of what I do in for the team and everything, it's like these are things that the whole team needs to think about, and you don't give up till you can't go anymore. And I didn't listen to the McLaren team, but on the AlphaTauri side, they were saying, if it's just a yellow flag, we will retire the car. But if they stop the race, we will repair the car and get you back out, which was fine. But when they came through the pit lane for that first drive through, they stopped the car. If they just followed everybody else around for another lap, basically 20 seconds after they stopped in the box, they called red flag. But because they had stopped in the box and the pit lane was closed, they lost that whole lap. So I think, Formula One, that they were a bit too quick to just kind of call it a day or not think of the big picture of having to stay on the lead lap. I thought maybe they thought if they stopped the race on that next lap that they wowould retract where they were, but no, that lap counted, and that's why you stay out there. You wait for the opportunity just in case something happens.
Yeah, that's why. Just casually watching it when I did, I was thinking, they were just going to retire the cars, and I thought, But when you brought that up, I thought, well, that's true. They should have anticipated a red flag. I mean, you could look at the crash. There was carnage all over.
You got nothing to lose, right?
You got nothing to lose. You're at the back anyway. Wait.
Yeah, if there's a yellow flag, you go out and you run till if there's a potential of a red flag. Always is during that kind of situation, and certainly how we saw how the incident panned out, the car being stuck, etc. So, I was actually kind of surprised they did throw a red, but you should, as a team, always hold out for any percentage of chance of keeping going. You need to use that and stay with it.
Yeah. Also, the first time Oscar's driven their Laga, so there was a bit of a learning curve for him too. On that, let's talk about Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yes, boy, what a difference a weekend makes. Wow.
Yeah. Someone did get a little pixie dust on that car this weekend, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. It's like somebody's like, "Oh, wait a minute, we weren't putting this thing in. Oh, we got it. Now we're gonna go."
Yeah, this whole
Yeah.
thing key to the whole under tray. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's put
yeah,
that on.
yeah. Wait, you weren't putting that part on the underside? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was off last
Incredible.
week. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, hey, not my responsibility, man. I'm topside aerodynamic. So Lance Stroll P5, that qualifying performance, Lance was legit, baby.
Legit,
Good
too
for
legit
him.
to quit.
Yes, P5 for Lance. Good drive for him. Fernando Alonso, P3. So I thought, like I mentioned, the qualifying performance may have been artificially impacted by the rain on Friday, but the pace was real, Paul. The upgrades seem to have worked well on this particular track. And although neither car got a good start, Alonso was able to claw his way back through the field, pass Hamilton for third, which is critical. From there, it was a managed race, but the real magic came when Sergio started hounding Alonso for P3. And I contend, I could be wrong, but I contend, and I went back and watched it again, I contend that Alonso handed Perez a veiled gift, a lolly, a carrot, if you will, with the pass, set him up, and pounced him on the final lap. I was watching that, and Fernando put on a masterclass in driving from which lines he chose. You know, he was Ving those corners, right? He basically set him up. You know, where and how he recharged his batteries, where he deployed his ERS, where he positioned the car to defend, and then where he attacked. Honestly, it was just sublime and a real joy to watch. And he finished just 0.053 seconds ahead of Perez in the end. And when I watched it again, it was really turn 10, 11, and 12 that really made the difference for Alonso as to how much he could gain in order to survive that long straight. And Alonso said the key for him was the pass on Hamilton. He said it allowed that longer stint and less damage to his tires. Had that not happened, he didn't think it would have worked. But I'm looking at it as a layman. I'm not a driver, Paul, but I was just absolutely gobsmacked. One of my favorite drives of Alonso. I just thought it was fantastic.
It was fantastic. And yeah, when I was watching at the time, when we did manage to even do the regular broadcast to get a lot of in-car stuff with Alonso, and what he's doing on the corners is quite different. And if you think back to the old days with the Renault, where he was having that big armfuls of steering in, to suit the car, and this is once again how his experience adapts to what the car needs and what the tire needs on that track. And if you see the lines he was taking, he was using a lot larger radius, but not necessarily just obsessing about getting down to the apex. He was talking about minimum speed, right? If you the old adage in racing school was slow in, fast out. You make it tighter at the beginning, and then you go unwind the wheel earlier, and then you can get on the power early. But that whole to and fro of that means the min speed goes down lower. And so he was basically trying to keep the min speed up a little higher, keep that momentum through the corner, putting less abuse on the tire, because if you lower the speed, then you add more shock to the tire as you try and then re-accelerate up. So he was trying to keep a more momentum, keeping the speed up through the corners, less abuse on the tires. But he made it work on the exits too. You look at him to go through that tight left-hander, then shoots up the hill. You see the difference between him and Sergio and how much actual track he could gain by taking that wider, smoother arc. So yeah, but it only works if you do it from the very beginning. And Alonso's he thinks so far ahead,
Yeah.
which is why, as you alluded to, you can surmise that even though he said, "Oh well, Sergio just braked a little late, into turn one, and I took that opportunity," but you look at the replay, Sergio really didn't outbrake himself into that turn, but Alonso sure set him up. And so Alonso let him get by and knew exactly what he needed to do on that last lap, and was probably, as I said, I was right around in the cars with some of these guys after the race, and just kind of replay, and they're doing the countdown of the laps to Alonso. They're giving him a little tips here on energy and etc. So he knows how many laps. He knows how quick Perez is and when he's going to probably get him. So then he controlled where he got him to allow him at least a shot on that last lap to get it back, which is absolutely what he did, which was so impressive how he did that. And it was so much fun to watch. I mean, just one of the best last couple of laps I've seen from anyone for a very long time. And I hold Alonso up at a very high level, and it's even higher now, honestly. Just incredible stuff from that guy. I hope he just keeps staying in Formula One, because I just love everything he does out there.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And if you do nothing else in that race, you can go back and watch Alonso, because it was a sublime drive, and you don't always get that. When you're watching the world feed and they're switching different passing and stuff like that. But if you go back and do what Paul did and watch his onboards and watch what he's doing, even when Perez boxed, he's so heads up. He's like, "Hey, do we need to stay out 3 or so laps, because we can do that." I mean, he's already reading the strategy. He knows, and they're like, "No, that's good. Let's box." But he had pace in hand, and he thought if they needed it, he could pull it off. And just a fantastic drive. It really was. And
that technique is something he's done in the past also. So, but he really made it work here. Obviously, with the quick undulations and change of direction, it just amplified how that technique that he uses works.
Yeah. And if you do go back, look at all the different lines he was taking in the different corners versus Perez, or even what he was doing earlier in the race, right? And you can see what he was adjusting for. And what he did. Yeah, I think I just think he gave him a lolly, set him up, and pounced. I just think, it was just wickedly sublime. The Alonso of old, the Alonso we all know and love. Not to overshadow that, Lance also had a good race, setting lap times competitive with Fernando and the leaders, and he worked his way up to P5. Said that he felt that the car was more like it was the beginning of the year for him, felt a lot better. He said, look, we were faster than Ferraris and Mercedes. To come on P5 is a good result. The team needed this result and this turnaround. And I got to thinking about it later. I was thinking, these upgrades that they brought, they really struggle with, and we thought, okay, well, a sprint weekend, maybe that caught them off, but this was a sprint weekend too. And I'm wondering if perhaps their upgrades, at this point when you're upgrading a little more for next year's car than you are this year's car. And I'm wondering if they kind of found a way of making those upgrades kind of work with this chassis, and perhaps kind of, tacked a little bit to come on song. I'm not sure, because the last podcast last week, I was saying I don't know what happened to Aston Martin and their development and their upgrades. I have no idea. They were struggling so bad, but it almost seems like they figured it out and got on top of this, or, it just could be that this track flatters that car. I don't know, but boy, what a turnaround.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there was a bit of a idea that they were getting their head around it last time when they ran Lance and Alonso on alternate setups, Alonso on the old one, and they were nearly equal in time. So it did show some positivity to it. And you don't get any test miles. And sometimes it takes a matter of going back to the computers and analyzing all the finer details to maximize that package. It's not, just because a package doesn't work in the beginning doesn't mean, there's not a couple of little fine tuners can really make it evolve and understand. When we saw McLaren evolve their car over the season, they obviously understood all the things they were doing wrong without having to be able to do test miles, right? They turned it around, working in between, and figured out what's wrong, what's right, and then fixing that. And so I think maybe that's a little bit of what Aston Martin did, just understand the package and best to utilize it.
And I think that's right. I think I heard that Aston Martin made the comment that they'd used the last couple of races kind of as a test session to figure these upgrades out, and that kind of comports if you consider kind of their dramatic lack of pace. in the last few races. So maybe that's what they
Right.
did. I don't know. Let's talk about Ferrari. Oh boy. This pains me. Charles Leclerc did not start. Isn't that fun? And Carlos Sainz a P6, another banner race for Ferrari with Leclerc spinning off on the formation lap due to a hydraulic issue. This left Carlos a lot of work to do for Ferrari. Carlos had enough pace to get by the Mercedes of Lewis and George, but that's not saying much as the Merc looked miserable in Brazil. And he fought himself up to P6. But, boy, tough weekend for Ferrari. Left Charles Leclerc. Why am I so blanking unlucky? And that's a good question.
Yeah, well, I mean, he makes his own luck sometimes. I'm not sure he's super unlucky, but that was obviously very unfortunate. Nothing he could do about it. And it didn't look too bad for him at the beginning of the weekend. But,
right.
Just know how the weekend evolved was kind of weird, how some cars struggled worse and worse as they got further into the weekend. And Ferrari weren't as bad as Mercedes, but they definitely weren't on top of it all. So,
for sure.
It was. We thought it was another Leclerc blunder right into the barriers.
Did.
Obviously, the hydraulics failed, and there's not. You just go along for the ride. They're a major part of so many things on the car that they fail, and everything just goes to crap. So, and then Sainz was dealing with an issue too, right, in the race. So they were just nursing that car at that point. Yeah,
right. Alpine, Pierre Gasly, old Pierre One-Eyed Gasly, in P7.
One-eyed.
He had some dust or something in his eye on the last few laps, and he was driving around with one eye. So that's not good.
It's going to hurt your depth perception, yeah.
Yeah, so the race went from 3D to 2D pretty quick. It's like, whoa, am I that close? So he finished P7, Esteban P10, another P10 for Esteban. He had P10 in the last race. He was on a 3-stopper, secured a point with that. Pierre was on a 2-stopper, looked good passing Hamilton, ran out of laps to mount an attack at Carlos, but maybe unlike Mercedes, the team were swapping drivers throughout the race to accommodate their individual strategies and their individual paces, and it ends up both cars in the points. A good finish for them.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. We've seen that hurt teams not working together. But, I mean, it is interesting how Alpine go back and forth. But I guess, the tires were so important on this race, right? So looks like they got a handle on it. But the ultimate pace of the car probably isn't up against a Ferrari, but this weekend. And good for Pierre to get some solid points, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was good for him. For Mercedes...
Get down.
Get in there, Lewis.
Speaking of tires, Lewis Hamilton down P8, George Russell a DNF after 2 good races. The challenge during the sprint was a setback, but a very good start from Lewis jumping the Astons was a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the Mercs struggle with their tires, and given the disparate performance with their upgrades in Austin and Brazil, I'm just curious if some of this impact, I don't know. I'm really fishing on this one. But given the performance of the last 2 Grand Prix and the performance here, I'm just wondering if the upgrades might impact our 2024 car. I hope not. I hope some of this issue doesn't translate to next year's car. I'm also very curious why the team chose to keep George behind Lewis, leaving them both in the grasp of Carlos. On one hand, having deference for Mercedes, I was trying to justify it in my own head, and I was thinking on one side, you could say, well, look, neither car were quick, so it really didn't matter who was leading who, because they both sucked as far as pace goes, and we were going to both be passed regardless of what we did, whether it was George leading Lewis, Lewis leading George. On the other side, I was thinking you could argue that if I was George, I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm clearly quicker than Lewis, at least in 2 times in that race. You wouldn't let me by. Yeah. And, why wouldn't you have just tried it? You've got to be able to tack during a race and use your best pace and performance and grip, and why wouldn't you let me buy and at least have a shot at it? And sure, George retired the car in hindsight, but if I'm George, I might argue, well, maybe I wouldn't have overheated if I wasn't stuck behind Lewis breathing his exhaust and dirty air the whole race. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, right?
Yeah,
What's going on there right now, and in those situations, because we know that they came back to him, said, "Are we racing or what are we doing here?" Now we're still discussing. It's like, get on with it. It was already by that point. It was already too late to help him anyway, but we don't hear all the communication. It may be, hey, Lewis, we need to pick up our pace, else you let George by, and because we saw Lewis stretch it out a little bit there, and then it wasn't very long after that call from George that he started falling back, but and obviously Lewis is trying to manage the tire as best he can. It's not like he's holding on for dear life trying to put in qualifying laps. He's trying to manage the tire. But, it would have been interesting for – the biggest thing, I think, was for Lewis to break the DRS train for George and literally leave him, right? I mean, if that's what they're doing, nursing the tires, then it would have been very helpful for Lewis to keep George behind him. I think it hurt them both.
I agree.
No team's going to go in there, we're just going to be passed anyway, don't worry about it. No team should have that attitude, and I'm sure Mercedes don't have that attitude in the race, and they're really trying to maximize what's going to happen. So,
I think you're right. I think that's what hurt. It's when Lewis pulled out and left George out of DRS, and then I think they were both toast at that point. I mean, I feel like on the outside looking in, it just came across to me that they were treating George like chum in the water. And at that point, I'm thinking, well, if I'm George and Lewis signed a 2-year deal and I'm going to be doing this for the next 2 years, that's not exciting. And I'm also curious, Paul, on this thing, I'm also curious. Now, this is when I'm really, really fishing on this one. But I'm curious that the team weren't maybe too cautious with their ride height here, given they had that disqualification in Austin and having to set it early on a Friday as a sprint weekend, and they couldn't really do anything with it from that point onward. I'm just kind of curious maybe if that wasn't an issue. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Yeah, possibly.
I'm trying to
just
explain
think
why the Mercedes was just so miserable.
I just think the tire being a single tire weekend just wasn't their best. Usually you've got like 2 other options to try and figure out what suits your car best. And if you're sitting on the tire that was the tire you don't want, and you have to race the whole race in that, then you're currently out to lunch. I think that the tire was very, very powerful in this race, and positive or negative to a lot of cars and how they work. Yeah,
I agreed. Let's see. AlphaTauri, Daniel Ricciardo, P13, Yuki Tsunoda, P9. I think Dan got mugged by a tire carcass at the beginning, which damaged his rear wing, but the red flag meant they could repair it. They did. He restarted a lap down and finished P13. His race was pretty much over at that point. But Paul, you'll be happy to know that Yuki F-bombed his way up into the points. He was in P10 early on and then stayed there, nipping into P9 for points. So he was pretty excited about that. A better race for Yuki.
Yeah. Yuki. He's so cute when he swears. Yeah. I think the car was pretty good there, honestly. I think if Daniel had a good run, I know they didn't get great qualifying, but I think overall that car was actually very good. It's certainly turned a leaf in these last few races. Absolutely. Yeah. Without that bad pit call, I think Daniel still could have had a shot. Obviously, he did everything he could not to hit that tire, and it had a magnet on it with Daniel's name on it. Unfortunately, you watch the in-car and he's like, what? It's like, son of a what's it? So
thank God for the halo; it saved his life.
Yes, the halo on the rear wing. But so that was a real shame. He obviously had nothing to do with that. It was a shame that they made that strategy pit call and boxing him on that first yellow flag lap. And I mean, Yuki can drive fast, but I think Daniel still would have probably been in a better position, and maybe even tigering it a bit further up there if he'd have been given half the chance. Yeah,
agreed. Let's see. I've got Williams next, Alex Albon. Where was he's a DNF, Logan Sargent P11. Alex got sandwiched by the Haas duo. no place to go. Ended up it ended his race. He ended up clouding Kevin Magnussen, so that was game over at that point. Kind of like Charles and last week or 2 weeks, last week.
Right.
Yeah, sort of the sandwich problem. But Logan Paul had a good race starting on mediums, and then he switched to the softs, a better tire early on to run up to P11. Just needed one more attrition ahead of him, or a bobble from Esteban. Didn't get that. Could have nipped into the points, but a better race for Logan, and I'm glad to see him doing well the last half of the season.
Yeah, better race for him. Even though there was a lot of attrition, obviously, that kind of helped him there. He still was beating other cars out there on the track, the Alphas, etc., and the Haas's. So I think it was a pretty good race for him. I think should be happy. Did have a chance to win points with Albon. Obviously, nothing he could have done. I mean, the Haas boys kind of made it difficult and came across, and he didn't turn the wheel in or out or anything. He was just staying his line and became a victim, really.
Yeah, right. Let's see. Haas, Nico Hulkenberg, P12, Magnussen, Kevin Magnussen, a DNF. Kevin had another DNF this weekend as both cars were involved in the Williams sandwich debacle at the start. That ended Kevin's race. Kevin moved over slightly, which meant Nico did, and then Nico tags Alex. Alex spins and hits Kevin, and it was like ping pong at that point. But Nico was able to get repaired because of the red flag and finished the race, but points were pretty much a tall order for that damaged car, so that didn't happen.
Yeah.
For them. I did see that
How much we can say about Haas positively this week?
Yeah, I don't really know. The only positive thing I can say is I saw that they're contesting the results in Austin 2 weeks later. They finish in P11.
Really?
And they're arguing. Yeah, they're arguing over some drivers that were taking too much of the curb in turn 6, and they want the stewards to re-look at that, and that would move them up to P10 and into points if they could get it. So I guess we're going to just litigate the races that have happened now.
We don't want to open that can of words. Yeah.
You don't, because then everybody's litigating races, and we're on VAR for the rest of the season. Finally, Alfa Romeo. This is a bad weekend from them. Valtteri Bottas, DNF, Zhou Guanyu, DNF. Valtteri was running in P10 early on, had a bad restart, and then Zhou retired the car with some technical issues, leaving Valtteri to do all the work, but that quickly came to an end when he had to box and retire as well. I read the team comments, and they didn't really say what the issues were with either car, and I haven't seen anything on that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that they don't, considering you got the hydraulic failure from Charles, obviously all the same internals and engine as the Alphas, so could be as easy as just a team, missing something on the car. I don't know. But,
yeah.
No reason for them to have to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, hard to know. Usually when they don't want to say it's a hydraulic issue. It's kind of a catch-all. That just kind of catches everything,
Yeah.
All right, well, that's the teams. That's how they finish. That's what we think about it. But we usually hand out awards during this podcast, so let's do this. We're always going to start at the top with Move of the Race. Okay, Paul, Move
What do you
the
think?
Race. I think we're...
I don't remember the same thing. Yeah. Let me think.
Boy, you had to really stretch to find a move of this race. Yeah, I think we both had Alonso on that one, did we not?
Oh, I think the whole world should have Alonso on that one.
Yeah, they too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was incredible. Yeah, he was just wow.
No more radio. The rest of the race.
There you go. There's Fred for you. Next award is Donkey of the Race. Okay, Paul, Donkey of the Race. I'm intrigued because we differ on this.
Yeah, I'm giving it to McLaren and AlphaTauri for their pit calls. Stop in the box when they could have not gone a lap down and had a chance at points for both of them. Quite honestly.
Yeah,
and they both had actually good pace when they got going again. But you start a lap down, they're never going to get anywhere, are you? So I think they won't make that mistake again. But it shouldn't have been the mistake they made in the first place.
Shouldn't have happened in the first place. Damn it.
Nope.
Not good enough, damn it. Not good enough.
That was not good enough. I had Mercedes. That was a tough weekend for them. And, you have to try,
Yeah.
I mean, if George is quicker, then let him around and let him have a run at Carlos. You got to try. If he's not, switch it back, whatever. But you got to try. But just to leave him out there, and then Lewis goes, just pull out a DRS, and George is toast, and now I'm toast, and I don't know. A lot of frustration. Toto came out after the race.
Lewis has a lot of Lewis has a lot of equity in there to call off those kind of decisions, it seems.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Well, that's what happens when you got a video of you groping a woman's breast. So.
Oh boy.
Oh, what are you gonna do? Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have a boom.
Isn't that what? Isn't that what got? What's the Russian guy?
It is
in the cab.
Remember that? And he knew that girl too. Yeah. See, nobody's saying anything about that, but the Russians. Yeah. I don't know. I'll let you figure it out.
Anyway,
you decide at home. Whatever. Let's do some mailbag, shall we?
You've got mail.
We got a lot of mail this week. We're going to start with David Reed.
Okay.
Do you know why I'm going to start with David Reed? Because he's Scottish, and if it's not Scottish, it's crap.
Oh, well, you should always let the Scottish go through first.
Always.
Very wise words.
Out. Paul's an Englishman, but he's got a lot of Scots in him, and I'm Scottish heritage, so if you haven't figured that out. So we're going to... Kudos to you, David. Kudos to you, my friend.
Being Scottish.
See, and if you've seen, I even have a shirt that I wore. You have to go back a few podcasts. It's got the whole Scottish flag. I look like DC sitting here. It's crazy.
You do, yes.
Yeah, I do. So David says, hey, been enjoying your podcast for the last couple of years. Best pod out there, in my humble opinion. David, thank you very much for saying that. I really like if Paul could give a potted history of his motorsport career. What has he driven? Could he explain a bit about the different car series, including those he's currently involved in, and what his current role is and what it involves? Much appreciated. Keep up the good work. All right, Paul, give us a potted history.
That's a whole podcast.
It is a whole podcast.
Not on my racing history, but on all the other stuff. That's
when your wheels fell off.
My front wheels fell off. Yeah, that was bad. Yeah, that's a long
that was
story.
Pretty bad. Yeah,
long, very short story actually. Yeah.
Well, to sum it up, you were in GT racing. You were sports.
GT racing, yeah. I mean, I could go back to when I was 12, got in my brother's go-kart, and my brother, being the irate anger management issue thing, was I was going too slow because I was working my way up to it, and they pulled me in. They said, you have to go faster. So I went out and just stayed flat on the gas and spun off into the weeds. And I was absolutely destroyed at that moment in time. My whole racing aspirations since I was a little boy were gone. I was toast. I was done. I crap at this, Oh, I'm so sad, right? So never got in a go-kart again, actually, because of that. Thank you, my brother. So I didn't get into a car till later on, till I was 18 in Formula cars. And then you could see the writing on the wall in Formula cars that, unless you got a big water catch every year, you got to, exactly, you got to find another way of doing it. So I didn't have a lot of money. I earned my, badges of being an instructor and working up. My first job was sweeping floor in a garage at a racing school. Worked my way up into an instructor. Met some people. Saved some money, bought my first car, then won my first ever race that I was in, which is in a Mustang, and then just I jumped around a lot onto all kinds of different things because I'd never had the budget or the means behind me to do that, so I just had to live on other people's funds, I guess, so I would jump around a lot. But in my second year ever, I was in IMSA, which is like the Michelin Pilot Challenge. I managed to meet somebody, and I just kind of jumped around in so many things, from Formula cars to open cockpit sports cars, but mainly in GT, and then I drove super touring cars a little bit. So even though I never probably put a full championship together till after I first began, which I did, but I was just chasing every opportunity. It's just life of a race car driver is very difficult. So I managed to make my career being an instructor and teaching other people how to do stuff that had the funds to some degree while I chased opportunities. And yeah, it worked out pretty well in the end, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And now you're the sporting manager for Heart of Racing.
Right, right. So I drove with Ian on one of these sporadic races way back when in endurance racing and everything, and we've always been friends ever since, really. And so he asked me to come on board to do that because as an instructor, as you learn how to deal with people and get to see how things work, and you have a really good idea. And ever since I was a kid, I was a student of the sport, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, even before I even turned a wheel, I was always trying to figure out what it was like to turn a wheel and why certain people did certain things. I remember the one time I met Ronnie Peterson, I was like 7 or something, and I was at Silverstone, and I said, Ronnie, I was overawed because it was Ronnie Peterson, for crying out loud, but I was like, what's your strategy? You're gonna kind of hang back and kind of see how the race evolves. What are you gonna do? And Ronnie Peterson, being Ronnie Peterson, was like, well, I'm just going to go out there and try and lead every lap. So I was like, okay, fair enough. But which is Ronnie Peterson, right? But it was like, I was always trying to, get more information, learn why people did things, so that if I ever got the opportunity, I could. And all that kind of analysis since I was a little kid kind of helped me be, a positive influence in my role here as a Heart of Racing, be it from the logistics side, creating side, strategy side, or even talking to the drivers about certain things. So.
Yeah. And just so you know, David, I've ridden with Paul in anger, and it's absolute white knuckle time. So he's the real thing, man. It's like, whoa, it's the real thing.
I mean, I think I could have been at a fairly high level given half the chance, but there's a lot of guys out there who have a lot of talent, guys and girls who have a lot of talent that the opportunities are minuscule in racing to find that opportunity. If you don't
Such
get there,
a narrow window.
Yeah, if you don't get the opportunity, I mean, there was a couple of times where if everything had gone right, this would have been would have sent me up the ranks. But these things don't happen for a lot of people, and just glad I can still be involved in the sport as I am.
And just as a backstory, also, Dave, is that Paul's family, his dad, his brother, they've been involved running teams, motorsports their whole life. So Paul grew up around that with his father and his brother, running teams and race winning teams and championship winning teams. So they've been involved with motorsport his whole life. He's been around it. He's a true petrol head.
Right.
So
The good thing is I was the best driver out of my whole family. So there you go. Hang that over my brother's head. He was wrong.
You were wrong. Let's see. Andrew Page asked, hey, Paul and Todd, so in keeping with the whole Brazilian Grand Prix theme, I'd like to know what you both think about Massa court case. I think he actually has got a point. Must have lost out on potential earnings and knock-on effect if not becoming world champion. Clearly, the win was not all in his own hands. Why is he doing this now, and how will this unfold, and how should it be resolved? Thank you, Andrew Page. So I think it came up because of that interview that Bernie Ecclestone said that that Formula One just made the decision so they didn't cancel the race, and what they should have done is canceled the race, or negated the points,
nullified the points,
nullified it. That's it. Yeah, I was looking for the word. Thanks for bailing me out. And so that's what he said, and then Massa got a hold of that and thought, you know what? I didn't know that nullifying a race is what F1 should have done. I didn't even know that was on the cards. And if that's the case, I would have been world champion, let alone had I been a world champion. Yeah, my earnings potential would have went up. My longevity in the sport may have went up, and my post-retirement prospects may have been better, So I think absolutely that's why it came up now. I don't think they'll go back. They're not going to take Lewis's championship away from him. I think at best, my hunch would be, Paul, correct me if you have a different opinion, but my hunch would be if it goes anywhere, and that's a big if at this point, if it would go anywhere, I could see maybe some compensation being paid out for, the issue, but I'd be surprised. I don't know.
Yeah. I think, there's been lots of championships that some other things have happened that directed a championship this way or that way that they
like
found
2021?
retroactively. Yeah, I mean, even way back in the Hunt Lauder days, all kinds of stuff was going on, right?
Yeah.
but you just can't go back. It's unfortunate. He does have a point, but he's not the only one. And you run the season to what's happening at that moment in time. So does that mean we have to rerun all the races? We go back to where that race started and go forward again? It's unfortunate,
Right.
but it's just kind of, you got to soak it up and suck it up.
Yeah, you do. It's kind of
He might get some money out of it, but he's not going to get a championship out of it.
I said on an earlier podcast, just Formula One needs to give him a job and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Just give him a job in the paddock. Let him, do something in the paddock as a race steward, whatever, guest steward.
Yep.
Or, I don't know. Anyway, let's see. Our old friend Me asked, Joe Sayward is reporting rumors of Fernando Alonso potentially swapping seats with Sergio Perez. What are your thoughts of Alonso partnering Verstappen and of Perez returning to the Silverstone team that he helped save from bankruptcy? What do you think about that, Paul? What's your source, Joe?
I just can't see Alonso. I mean, Alonso would love to win more races, and maybe that's what he would see as the opportunity to it.
Yeah.
And Alonso is full of confidence, and he's going into it. He may go into the team thinking, I can beat Max Verstappen.
Yeah,
I'll prove
sure
it.
he does.
I'm no Sergio Perez. I'm Fernando Alonso. Damn it!
Right.
And I'm going to win races, and I will be, on like snot to try and win a championship from him. And figure out a way politically to work it within that system, which would be probably the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, that'd be very
so I
hard.
could see him taking that opportunity because he doesn't have that many years left. I don't think the Aston Martin team's going to be able to turn it around and be Red Bull beaters in the next 2 years when Fernando. So I think he would do it if he was allowed to, but and I think it would be a very interesting partnership indeed. But we remember we heard that quite a few years ago that was a potential too, right? And that kind of came to nothing.
And I don't think I'd be very surprised if Red Bull would do that. I don't think they would. They've got a champion in hand.
They don't need to.
If they want to upset
They
that.
They don't need that headache, right?
No. And I saw Fernando deny it and said, that we kind of took a run at Joe on that. But
yeah. And
then I saw Craig Slater today, I think, saying that he pretty much heard that ain't happening. So anyway, there you go. Okay. Derek asks, a few years ago I wrote in a joking prediction that Haas would end up with a Renault engine since Renault had dropped down to providing no other teams with motors and we're missing out on all of that extra data, which is true, Derek. We spoke about that at the time. He says, here we are years later, and they seemed like they were about to support on Andretti before they said the offer expires. Why do you think Alpine would play hardball like this? Do they see Andretti as enough of a potential midfield threat that they don't want to supply them? It seems like they'd be eager to have that extra info from another team running their motors and equipment. Or is it just making life hard for new entrant? Derek, it's a really good question. I think what Alpine was saying is that they had an agreement in principle with Andretti that should they come in, that they would supply it. But it was an initial preliminary sort of letter of intent, basically, in principle. But there was a time limit on that, and they still haven't been accepted on the grid, and that time limit has passed now. And I think what Alpine was saying is they would definitely still supply them, but two things. One, they need to do a new formal contract with, all the permutations of what the supply, the cost, all that. So they need to redo the contract because the old one has expired. And the other thing is that they would need to do it like right now in order to ramp up production to support another team for next year because it's already almost too late. And so they were saying that they would need to do it right now.
Well, 2025 is when it's 2025 is when the engine would be due with Andretti, right? Then Andretti's not going to be on the grid next year, obviously.
Right. So they're saying they need to know it now.
But they do need to know it now because they do need that much time. They need a year and a half at minimum. They need a year, ramp up,
Yeah. So I think that's what Alpine was saying. You could look at that as they're trying to put pressure on F1 to hurry up and bring Alpine or Andretti in, saying, hey, F1, we need to know, come on, we're, if we're going to supply these guys. Or you could look at it as leveraging the pressure of the moment to say, Andre, we need a whole new contract now, right? So, but
Yep.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Watch this space, though. I think it's a good point, Derek. Miles Moose asked this, Paul. What separates championship caliber drivers from mid-pack drivers? I'm asking this both on and off track. There's been lots of fast drivers.
Just
over
look
a
at
single
Fernando
lap.
Alonso's drive this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. He said there's been lots of fast drivers over a single lap that never threatened a championship. If you're Mercedes, how can you tell if Russell is one or not? Same goes with Ferrari with Leclerc. It's a really good question, Paul. What do you think?
Yeah. Wow. There's so many different factors, but consistency, speed, good choices out there, racecraft, able to work with the car and develop a car. You know, it's one thing you can drive a car as fast as it can drive, but it's another thing to be able to get the car to drive like Prost used to do, get the car around you so you can drive the car easy, but it still be dominant. So there's so many factors and inputs a driver has to a whole team. Camaraderie in the team, not upsetting, you know, making sure you get along with people, but push the team forward like Schumacher, like Senna did, etc. That's
Right.
what makes them great. They makes them great. Them creating the place where everyone can bring the car forward, including themselves, and then they execute when they're out on the track, and they don't let the team down by making silly decisions.
Yeah, Lauda did that. You know, there's
Yep.
people in the past, you know, when you look at it. And I think, Miles, it'd be interesting if you think about which people were successful as champions that, you know, just were in the right place, right time, right?
Right.
And there's some of that, too, in Formula One's history. So I wouldn't rate them as, you know, Senna, Schumacher, Lewis, Max caliber, but they won titles. But probably weren't that caliber, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it ebbs and flows, but it's a really good question. Spencer Smith, our friend, Spencer
Hey,
Smith.
Spencer.
Says, yes, he says, not to dive into yet another tire question, but with the upcoming Las Vegas race, which will most likely be cold, and the new surface, how should the team set tire pressure? It looks like a low downforce track, but will more aero be needed to keep heat in the tires, especially on the long straights, or more tire pressure to keep the heat in to increase grip? What do you think, Paul?
Well, the tire pressure really it's about how it works with the car. They're not going to change it because of the temperature. I mean, there's certain things they can do, but the more tire pressure, usually the worse the car is, honestly. They're always fighting to start with lower pressure for pace. If you start at a lower pressure, but there's a minimum of pressure. So I'm sure in the cold weather, they'd want to start a lot lower. So that when they get to the high pressure, when the car is up to temperature, that the actual tire is at a lower pressure, but they're also held by the boundaries of Pirelli and what they mandate. So they have to start at a minimum pressure, which probably isn't even close to ideal or what they'd prefer to do. So they're not going to sacrifice aero just to get heat in the tires, but there's always, you know, one car's going to get, you know, more engine tire than another, and that will be, you know, basically an overall package thing rather than just adding tire pressure or whatever.
Yeah. Good question, Spencer. And then finally, Melton Rickey asked this. While watching the Perez-Alonso battle, my wife commented that Alonso is pretty clever. I paused and thought, he said, your wife is spot on. He said, I paused and thought maybe Max was his equal. Then said he's the highest driver IQ on the grid. What do you guys think? Also, it's my belief that Paul's growing his hair out for a Gray Days reunion. Play breakdown, man.
Hey, you've got that track, I think. But
I think I do. No. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. We'll play it one day on the podcast. Yeah, I actually met up with my old bass player over at Long Beach. So, but no, not playing again. I would love to do that though. It would be fun to do it one more time.
I know it would.
Yeah,
but I can't play that song in here. I'll get a copyright strike by the jerks in Gray Days.
Yeah, we demand our 5 cents. I tell you.
You want your 5 cents, man. Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you want to listen to it, it's on Amazon Music, I think, right?
Is it?
I think it's.
You look up Gray Days. It's old school. It's old money spelling. GRE.
Yeah, look up.
That's how I spell great.
Gray Days breakdown. You can search. I think it's on. What's the other one? There's other
Spotify?
Music ones. Spotify. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Who else is smart?
There you go. All right. Highest driver IQ on the grid. Alonso, you agree?
Right.
Yeah. I think Paul and I have talked about this because we both like hockey, and we've talked about Wayne Gretzky just has ice vision. He can just see the complete game and the complete ice rink at all times. And we talk about Alonso having that.
Yeah, I think Max has it. Lewis has it. I think Max has it, but he just hasn't had enough. He hasn't got quite enough.
Schumacher had it.
From
Senna
Alonso
had
also
it.
Helps, right? But
Prost,
the talent level is very close.
Certain
so I
drivers
think Alonso's maybe a bit ahead, but I think Max is very smart.
I think so.
As well. Yeah. You can't be stupid and do what he does.
Yeah.
You just can't. And you couldn't have done what Lewis did by being,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he knows exactly.
A lot of
what's
factors
going
go
on.
into winning races, winning championships for sure.
Yeah, he knows what's going on. Yeah, right. Not understanding what is going on. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for sure. All right, well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think about the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Let us know what you think about the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. You can go to theparcfermé.com, share your opinion with decorum and civility. As always, if you like this podcast, go over to your favorite podcast.
What do I need to
player,
do? Wear a funny hat or something?
We'd appreciate that. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreon and supporters out there. We've been losing a few lately, Paul. So if any of you are out there listening, I know.
Bring in a kid, like they do in those sitcoms where they, after a few years getting a little low.
Something like that.
Bring in a kid, that's going to spice things up.
Maybe we need a buzz phrase or something for the podcast.
Not good enough,
I
Dad.
don't know what's going on, Yeah. Bring in a kid. Yeah, that would be good. So anyway, if you thought about dog, I've got 3 of those I could bring in. So if you thought about ever supporting us, you can go over to our website as well. It says support us on the website. You can do Patreon or PayPal or whatever you want to do, but or coffee or whatever. Anyway, a huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. We could not and would not do this podcast without you. And Paul gets a little brief respite, Paul, for a week. Well, yeah, you do, until the Las Vegas. So what we'll end up doing is I will bring Grace in next week. I will go find her, and then we will be back next week to do it all over again. And until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber.